Washington Post sports columnist. Barry, good morning to you.
Hope you guys are doing well.
Barry.
We are doing well.
How was your Prez Day weekend?
Little skiing, little sports watching, pretty good all in all. How about you guys?
It was solid. Didn't do either of those things.
Wasn't shushing down the slopes like one Barry's Svrluga.
Yeah.
Whitetail. My daughter's on the ski team up there, so a lot of time on 270 over the winter months.
Oh, cool.
Barry, are you like a thrill seeker skier, or are you more like an beginner intermediate slope guy?
I'm a lifelong skier, non-thrill seeker. Ski like I'm in my 50s and am a ski dad guy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's smart.
Makes sense.
Right.
Very good.
Save those knees and legs and back and head. Hey,
Exactly.
We were talking about the Nats earlier in the show. We got a lot of stuff we want to get into, but we were talking about the Nats, and obviously Mark Lerner said this team is not for sale anymore. He obviously didn't get what he wanted. He didn't get what offer he wanted. Now, that could change over the next couple of years, but we threw it out to fans, and most fans are unhappy about it because they know that the Lerners currently aren't going to go out there and spend the money that the Philadelphia Phillies are going to spend, that the Mets are going to spend, that the Braves are going to spend, and become better. They're kind of relying on all of these prospects. So what was the poll we threw out there? 85%?
Good news or bad news? I think it's right around 86% say bad news.
Yeah, but there still are about 15% that say it's good news. Now, I'm guessing a lot of that is because just loyalty based on bringing a world championship here. But your thoughts on Lerner saying that it's off the market?
Well, I mean, it all is about what do they do now? I mean, do they continue to run it like the Pittsburgh Pirates, or do they do what they did when they won a championship and spend $210 million on Max Scherzer and go buy Jason Worth and build, have your young core that at the time was Ryan Zimmerman and Ian Desmond and Steven Strasburg and Jordan Zimmerman, and then build pieces around it. If they do that, then there's no reason it has to be bad news. The reason that there's uncertainty about that is because, our beat writer asked Mark Lerner yesterday in West Palm what the deal was, but he was not allowed to answer ask follow-ups like, what's your commitment to payroll at the major league level? What's your commitment to spending on player development, spending on international signings? So I think it's a giant TBD. I do think it takes them out of the limbo that going into another season with the for sale sign presumably up would have been. Like, now the pressure is on the Lerners. We know who the target is in terms of asking them what their commitment will be and forcing them into action, not this offseason because the core isn't ready yet. But I do think next offseason, if their biggest signing is Joey Gallo, there are going to be really some questions about what their hope and the desires for this franchise really is.
That's a good point. I mean, what if they, Rizzo went to him and said, look, these core kids, we're going to give them one more year in the minors, and then they're going to be ready to be on the opening day roster next year. And then Mark says, okay, I'll go out and buy a couple players to throw into that lineup, or a pitcher or whatever. I mean, that's a possibility. Who knows?
It's totally a possibility, and I know for a fact that most of the people in the baseball operations department didn't believe that this year was the year to go spend, that you would have been, there's really not a point in improving from 71 to 75 wins. You're going to get the Corbin contract off the books after this year. You're a year closer to getting the Strasburg contract off the books. You should have plenty of financial flexibility. And I'm all about criticizing the Lerners. I have no problem doing that. But you have to remember that when they did have that run from 2012 to 2019, when they won 4 division titles, made a wild card, and won a World Series, there's more years in there than not that they were top 10 in payroll. So they skimp on a lot of things. But when the time was right, they were convinced that spending money on players and free agents, including Worth and Scherzer, but also smaller deals like Daniel Murphy and the guys that eventually won the championship, Howie Kendrick and people like that. So I don't think we know exactly what this means. I think we know now who we look to put, blame or praise on because they're saying they're not selling it anymore.
I will say that there are some pretty big name unsigned guys right now, like the Blake Snells of the world, Matt Chapman. And I'm not Cody Bellinger. I mean, if you went out and got Blake Snell, I understand that the Learners don't want to spend a bunch of money on him. I don't even know what his price tag would be. Probably similar to what, Sonny Gray's was, but so 75 to 100 million, but that would be pretty nice if you went out, spent the money on a proven guy, all right, and put him with JoJo Gray and Mackenzie Gore. Now, obviously, he's not going to be going to the playoffs this year, but next year when some of those prospects come up, man, now you've got 3 really good pitchers, plus what you got coming up, the Kate Cavallis. I think, I know they're not going to do it, but there's still some guys out there that you can pluck probably for cheap because they're unsigned and, they're asking for too much, but maybe you can negotiate.
That's the question, I think, is if you can get a deal there,
yeah. Sure,
absolutely. And I think, Jason, you would want the length of the deal to at least be into, it doesn't have to be 7 years, and in fact shouldn't be 7 years, but you would want it to be a bridge to the years when you're going to be competitive, whether that's 2025 or maybe 2026, because this team does need some sort of North Star in the clubhouse, which I think is lacking right now. Patrick Corbin is obviously the longest tenured player and, in a way most accomplished, but he doesn't have the personality and he hasn't had the performance to be an absolute tone setter. And, this is how we do things. This is how we work. That was one of the reasons that Worth was brought in to be a veteran presence from a team that had won a championship. Like that, I think kind of matters because the guys who are the core of the rebuild that have already been in the clubhouse now in Keibert Ruiz and Josiah Gray and Mackenzie Gore, they are saying that Ruiz is that guy, that leader guy, the tone setter. I'm not 100% sure I'm all in on that. I don't think he's found himself enough to be that guy yet. So they're going to need people like that. And if you could get somebody on the cheap, like you say, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all if it's a 3 or 4 year deal and it's a guy who's going to carry you into those years that you're going to be competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't give him 7 years, 175 million like Aaron Nola got. But man, if you could get it 4 years for 80 million or 90 million, I think it would be a good investment. But that's just me.
Barry,
Agreed.
what's the latest, if anything, on the Strasburg standoff? I guess we'll call it. He hasn't retired. He's still on the books, obviously. I know the team wanted him to be present for spring training. It doesn't sound like he wants to do that. Like, is there any movement there? Is there any news there on Strasburg?
If there is, I don't have it, Cakes. I mean, I'm going down there late this week for 5 days or so, and obviously we'll be asking about it. It really, I mean, it stuck out to me that Mike Rizzo in his, camp opening remarks to reporters said, we expect to see Steven later in spring training. I don't know if that's been communicated by Strasburg to the Nets that, I'll come down there and help with pitchers for a little bit and at least be around and be a sounding board. He was, very quietly, in his later years, I saw him many times talking in the clubhouse to younger pitchers. He was there to take questions. He's not an assertive guy, as we know. He's not outgoing in any way. In fact, he's quite the opposite. So I can see why they would think there's value in that. And I also would note that expectation or that onus that they want to put on Strasburg to go down to spring training is really more about Mark Lerner and Scott Boras, the agent, having a beef about all of this stuff, that they couldn't get a retirement kind of ceremony scheduled. I still don't quite have all the details on why that collapsed and whether it had anything to do with Major League Baseball not wanting to retire a player who still was on an existing contract. But it's certainly worth poking around, but only in kind of a curiosity way, because there's, any questions about is this guy going to pitch again? He's not going to pitch again. Like his body is broken. He needs to go about trying to have it so he can have a good life, not throw a fastball at 97, on the paint.
Yeah.
Talking to Barry Svrluga, columnist for the Washington Post. Now, I know you didn't contribute to this article, but the Washington Post had a lengthy feature article about Ted Leonsis, DC, Alexandria, Youngkin, Bowser. One of the things that jumps out is, according to Leonsis, I guess it's according to Leonsis, it could be also from Bowser, he claims he would have accepted DC's offer had it come to him earlier. How much do you buy that? Is that just spin? Because in the article it says, there were emails back and forth, and eventually Bowser says, all right, we'll give you $500 million out of the $800 million needed to renovate and redo everything in the arena. But he had already set up the meeting with Youngkin, or the conference.
Well, I mean, he'd already – that was on – I might have my days of the week slightly mixed up, but I believe those last emails were on a Sunday night, and the press conference to announce the move to Virginia was on Wednesday. Like,
Correct.
That was very, very, very late in the game. And I will say – and I'm not on Ted's side in any of this. I very badly want the teams to stay downtown for reasons I'm sure we've discussed before. But Bowser looks late to the game, and not only looks late to it, she was late to it. I had been told months ago by people in this district government who were concerned that her obsession with having her legacy be the mayor that brought football back to the district was in danger of not paying enough attention to what was needed at Capital One Arena for Ted's teams. And it was almost natural that his eye would wander. And now I think the problem is, so I can believe that he would have taken that deal 6 months ago, 8 months ago. But I think the district was asleep at the wheel in not knowing. I mean, I knew they were talking to Virginia, and they had to, they're having renderings of this arena and this complex being drawn up. Like, that didn't happen in 2 days. Like, they did not have their ear to the ground on this. And I wholly believe it could have been prevented if they had more aggressively talked to Ted about what are your needs, how can we help. And maybe the ship has sailed now.
So is it in your gut, do you think it's going to happen? I just don't think I can pull the trigger either way. I think now Ted wants it to happen because he sees it as an economic opportunity for him, and he doesn't see it as I'm going to be remembered for abandoning the district. He's really intrigued by the opportunity to build something from scratch rather than making the best out of what he can downtown in the district where he doesn't have as much land. I believe all of that, but I don't know enough about Virginia politics to know, is the state legislature going to buy into an economic development plan that doesn't affect, Southwestern Virginia or the Tidewater, that really has an impact in a very small area, and put public money toward that? I mean, until the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, I got to believe that's in question. And keep in mind, Ted hasn't signed anything binding that he's going there. So I continue to think we're more at the beginning of this process than we are at the end.
Hey, Barry, one quick question about a former National. Those quotes from Anthony Rendon were some eye-openers. Did you know that he was this surly when he was with the Nationals? Did we see this with him?
What was your experience with him?
It because his numbers were really good, and then they've fallen off, obviously, with the injuries and what's happened out in L.A.
Yeah, I heard you guys talking about it, and it was definitely an issue here. He would, if he knew that if he hit 2 bombs in a game or whatever, made the big play, he was going to have to talk to us after the game. And he made a habit of putting a chair up in front of his locker with the back to the reporters to create a little ring as if we were going to crowd his space, which is everybody's professional. So that was a thing he would do. He would talk at spring training when he got there. And then I remember one time he closed the session and said, all right, talk to you guys on April 2nd, whenever opening day was. It's like I tried to break through that barrier a lot, and he's just not here for it. Now, I will also say it doesn't mean he's a bad person to the core. He contributed and was the point player for the Nationals Youth Baseball Academy for a lot of his years here. I know he gave money there that he didn't want, public credit for. He spent a lot of time out there, so I think there's good in there, but there's also just unnecessary surliness. So couple that with unavailability and poor performance, and I think you get kind of the worst case scenario for him out in LA right now.
Yep, it's deadly cocktail right now for Anthony Rendon. Barry, thanks for the time, man. We always appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a great week.
See you, bud.
That's Barry Svrluga, Washington Post sports columnist.